talking fiction here. I'm talking historical facts. What was the role of the Christian church in the destruction, enslavement, exploitation, and marginalization of black people? Pope Nicholas V, a Roman Catholic Church Pope in the 14th century, is the one who said, I'm talking about the Pope, he gave permission that black people can be enslaved, made to be slaves. And the justification he gave was that black people are at the level of animals. They do not have a soul. So he gave authorization for the enslavement, exploitation, lynching, raping, and destruction of black people. That's when it started by Pope Nicholas V. A white pope said you're an animal. I'm talking about your ancestors. It started in the church. Secondly, King Leopold II. Now, you can go and Google the letter of King Leopold II. And he said, make these black people, tell them, Hori, it is difficult for a rich man to go to heaven. It is like a camel going through a needle's eye. And that's what you must indoctrinate them with. Indoctrinate them. Tell them it is okay for they can struggle and suffer here on earth. Tell them they must not mind to struggle and suffer here on earth. Because in heaven, they will walk on the streets of gold. Tell them that the gold which is here on earth is worthless. I'm saying this to open your mind for the damage that is in the mind of the black person was crafted, it was designed from the church pulpit.
Did you know that the church, a place of peace and spiritual connection, historically enforced compliance among black individuals during slavery? In 1883, King Leopold II of Belgium allegedly issued a letter to colonial missionaries with chilling orders regarding the conversion of black individuals to Christianity. These commands that would forever alter the course of black nations and intertwine faith and religion with a sinister agenda. The content of the letter is so disturbing that some believe it might be fabricated. However, given all the oppression this tyrant inflicted on black people, can we truly dismiss the possibility that the letter is genuine? Here are a few excerpts from the letter so you can decide for yourself.
Reverends, fathers, and dear compatriots, the task that is given to fulfill is very delicate and requires much tact. You will go certainly to evangelize, but your evangelization must inspire above all Belgium interests. Your principal objective in our mission in the Congo is never to teach the blacks to know God. This they know already. Evangelize the blacks so that they stay forever in submission to the white colonialists, so they never revolt against the restraints they are undergoing. Recite every day, happy are those who are weeping because the kingdom of God is for them. Convert always the blacks by using the whip. Keep their women in 9 months of submission to work freely for us. Force them to pay you in sign of recognition, goats, chicken or eggs, every time you visit their villages. And make sure that blacks never become rich. Sing every day that it's impossible for the rich to enter heaven. Make them pay tax each week at Sunday Mass. Use the money supposed for the poor to build flourishing business centres. Institute a confessional system which allows you to be good detectives, denouncing any black that has a different consciousness, contrary to that of the decision maker. Teach the blacks to forget their heroes and to adore only ours. Never present a chair to a black that comes to visit you. Only ours. Never present a chair to a black that comes to visit you. Don't give him more than one cigarette. Never invite him for dinner even if he gives you a chicken every time you arrive at his house.
This letter, if true, is just one of the many proofs of how the church was used to brainwash blacks into submitting to slavery. And whether the letter really is true or not, we cannot deny that King Leopold II's rule was a tragic historical tale of systematic racial brutality and unspeakable atrocities. Forced labor, torture, murder, and the ghastly practice of amputating hands from men, women, and children were routine punishments for failing to meet his demands. Truly, his reign itself was a crime against humanity. The Holy Bible, in the white colonizer's hands, and his interpretations of it, have been the greatest single ideological weapon for enslaving millions of non-white human beings. This is a fact that simply cannot be denied. According to Jomo Kenyatta, the founding father and first president of Kenya, when missionaries arrived, the Africans had the land and the missionaries had the Bible. They taught us how to pray with our eyes closed. When we opened them, they had the land and we had the Bible. Just as Arab raiders and traders used Islam and the Quran to justify the trans-Saharan slave trade, European colonizers wielded the Bible as a tool to rationalize and perpetuate the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade. In this dreadful chapter of history, the church played a huge and disappointing role as the backbone of this inhumane enterprise. Did you know that most of the slave traders and slave ship captains were even considered to be very good Christians? For example, Sir John Hawkins, the first slave ship captain to bring African slaves to the Americas, was a religious man who insisted that his crew serve God daily and love one another. His ship, ironically called the good ship Jesus, left the shores of his native England for Africa in October 1562. The church, especially the Roman Catholic and the Anglican churches, had plantations with slaves working on them. For example, the United Society for the Propagation of the Gospel, the world's oldest Anglican mission agency, owned several acres of slave plantations. It has been documented that the 800-acre Codrington slave plantation in Barbados was owned and operated by them during the 18th and 19th centuries. With all of this said, one may ask, why would the church itself condone such barbaric acts as slavery? Why would they allow the Bible to be used by tyrants such as Leopold to perpetuate cruelty? Unfortunately, the answer lies in the scripture, in the same way that the answer for extremist Islamic terrorism in the world today lies in the Quran. However, this does not mean that the religion itself is to blame. Rather, it is the fault of human interpretation. Throughout history, colonizers selectively used biblical passages to justify the enslavement of African and indigenous peoples. For instance, they cited verses like Genesis chapter 9, verse 20 to 27, which discusses the curse of Ham. According to the verse, Noah planted a vineyard after the great flood. He became drunk from its wine and lay naked in his tent. His son Ham saw him in this state and told his brothers, Shem and Japheth, who covered their father without looking at him. When Noah awoke and learned what had happened, he cursed Canaan, Ham's son, to be a servant to his brothers. Specifically, Genesis chapter 9, verse 25 to 27 reads the verse as follows.
Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves will he be to his brothers. Praise be to the Lord, the God of Shem. May Canaan be the slave of Shem. May God extend Japheth's territory. May Japheth live in the tents of Shem, and may Canaan be the slave of Japheth.
The curse of Ham has been a controversial biblical passage, twisted and manipulated throughout history to serve various agendas. One of the most disturbing interpretations emerged during the transatlantic slave trade where proponents of slavery falsely claimed that Africans were descendants of Ham, thus destined for servitude due to the curse. This warped interpretation, fueled by racism and greed, provided a convenient religious justification for the brutal exploitation and dehumanization of millions of Africans. Another verse that was used with evil intentions was Ephesians chapter 6, verse 5, which instructed slaves to obey their masters as divine sanction for their brutal practices. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear, and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. This verse was used not only to legitimize the exploitation of labor, but also to reinforce racial hierarchies and portray non-white individuals as inherently inferior and destined for servitude. It's important to note, however, that the Apostle Paul's teachings in Ephesians reflect the cultural context of the
This is the life.
Hey Gus, we're gonna play horse.
How about it?
social institution. His instructions were likely intended to help maintain stability within the early Christian communities and to prevent unnecessary conflict that could arise from challenging the prevailing social order. In the context of slavery, people often overlook what the same apostle said in 1 Timothy 1:9-10. This passage reads, "We also know that the law is made not for the righteous, but for lawbreakers and rebels, the ungodly and sinful, the unholy and irreligious, for those who kill their fathers or mothers, for murderers, for the sexually immoral, for those practicing homosexuality, for slave traders and liars and perjurers, and for whatever else is contrary to the sound doctrine." In this verse, we can clearly see how he acknowledges the evil in slave trading and reminds us that man-made laws are often made to benefit the one who made them. Nevertheless, many of the words in the Bible have been taken out of context in order to justify slavery. Reverend Richard Furman, president of the South Carolina Baptist Convention in 1823, said, "The right of holding slaves is clearly established in the Holy Scriptures, both by precepts and by example." As we can clearly see, the church and the early Christians saw nothing wrong with slavery and fully engaged themselves. Most churches and cathedrals owned several acres of slave plantations and owned several slaves. Even when slavery was abolished, most churches had to be compensated for setting their slaves free. Yes, one of the ironies of the 1833 Slavery Abolition Act was that it was the slave owners, not the slaves, who were compensated at the emancipation of slaves. The Anglican Church received 8,823 pounds sterling in compensation for its loss of over 400 slaves. The Bishop of Exeter, along with 3 of his colleagues, received some 13,000 pounds in compensation for over 660 slaves. All these have been well documented. In reality, many church members of that era were eager to maintain slavery, going to great lengths to exploit any scriptural loopholes they could find. And if they encountered passages that contradicted their stance, they often resorted to omitting those specific words altogether. The Slave Bible, a disturbing artifact from the late 18th and early 19th centuries, serves as a chilling example of how religious texts were twisted to manipulate and control enslaved Africans. Commissioned by missionary societies, this version of the Bible was intentionally edited to remove any passages that could inspire hope for freedom or equality. Key verses that spoke of liberation, like Exodus chapter 3, verse 7-10, and Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, were either missing or heavily modified. Instead, the Slave Bible emphasized obedience and acceptance of one's lowly position. This was a deliberate strategy by slaveholders to reinforce the idea that slavery was divinely ordained and to discourage any resistance from the enslaved. Despite its oppressive intent, the Slave Bible ironically offered enslaved Africans a glimpse into the teachings of hope and justice. Many found ways to interpret biblical stories of liberation, using them to fuel their own resilience and dreams of freedom. Now, we did not mention all of these for you to turn away from the church or your faith, but rather to inspire a critical examination of its history and a deeper understanding of how even the most sacred texts can be misused and manipulated. It's important to acknowledge these injustices to ensure they are never repeated and to foster a more inclusive and equitable faith for all. Religion is meant to provide meaning, purpose, and guidance in life. It offers a framework for understanding the world, our place in it, and our relationships with others. It seeks to connect individuals with the divine or transcendent, offering comfort, inspiration, and a sense of awe. In no way must it be used for hate and for sin. Remember, the true power of faith lies not in blind obedience, but in thoughtful engagement and a commitment to the good values instilled in faith. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the church's role in slavery. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more thought-provoking content. Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay faithful to your values.
And stay woke.
We hope you'll be with us for our next video.